Introduction to Meditation, Session 3, and this is being held on January 26, 2017 at Dalhousie University, and today we're in room B400. The topic today is Relaxation Response. As I said, this is the third session, and we've had two already. Session 1 was a look at how the ancients approached thought and meditation. And in Session 2, we looked at how science, Western science, discovered about the body-mind connection. Today we'll be looking at the relaxation response, and I hope you find that of interest. What we'll do, we'll continue and do a review of some of the material from the last two sessions, just sort of make sure everyone's fine. And we'll be looking at some of the notes from the last class and just sort of seeing, and then we'll do our guided meditation. And I'm trying to keep it around 20 minutes for the content for the topic, and we'll be looking at the stress response, relaxation response, and then approaches to deal with those. And then we'll wrap it up at the end with the detachment meditation. And again, I'll try to leave about 20 minutes so that we can have some discussion at the end. Just a quick review of the resources. As I mentioned, we do have this presentation online. And we do have the actual meditations that we do in the class that you can run at home. And of course, there's the Facebook page. Okay, let's look at some of the notes from Session 2. And again, I broke them up into three categories. There were a lot of notes about the color meditation. And it's interesting that some people identified some difficulties they were having, recalling memories or imagining particular colors and so on. Something that came to my mind was that meditation is work. And I mentioned that Qi Kung means energy work, Kung meaning work. So it's not surprising that it's taking some amount of concentration and effort, but it shouldn't be too difficult, and you shouldn't be, concerned about it being a challenge. The other thing I like to comment here is that sometimes we'll expect to have a similar experience each time we meditate, and for me, the experience is different each time. So don't be surprised if it's different again. And that's just fine. Some specific comments about the detachment meditation. A lot of people are enjoying it, and some people found that the time went by really quickly. One interesting comment was about pain. And the individual who made that comment indicated that they had pain that disappeared during the meditation and then returned afterwards. Now that may be a big hint about how we process pain. And remember, pain is kinesthetic thinking. Just something to think about. Now, someone indicated they had questions, a lot of questions, and that's great. And what you could do if you have questions, write them down and just leave them with me, and I'll go through them and make comments back to you. I find these notes are great for that because it's given me a chance to get direct feedback from you and to be able to reply directly to you from each class. So if you have questions, particularly if you have a question during the week, don't just file it away in your mind. Write it down somewhere, because if you're like me, you'll forget it. And again, this question came up about the differences between mindfulness and meditation. And my response to that is that there are different approaches to getting into a meditative state. And remember that it's you doing whatever style of meditation it might be, it's still going to be you. And what we're after here is not a particular way of meditating, but a particular approach, the way that you process your three bodies. And I'll be looking at that when we go into the relaxation response, but don't get too hung up about all the different kinds of meditation. And what they're all trying to do the same thing. They're trying to balance the body and to get you into a more receptive, open state. Some terms that we will be talking about and discussing today. The stress response, even though the topic is the relaxation response, we need to talk about the stress response. And some of the words that go under stress response you might be familiar with. The sympathetic nervous system and Yang energy, Yang being a Eastern term for the strong energy. Then we have relaxation response, and three terms or words, concepts that are related to the relaxation response. One term that you might hear is called the rest and digest activity of the body. So when you're resting and digesting, it happens when you're relaxed. It's associated with something called the parasympathetic system in your body. We'll be talking about that. And again, using the Eastern terminology, this would be considered yin. We'll also be approaching something or discussing something called the neutral observer. And that's what we're going to do in the guided meditation. In the guided meditation today, we're going to move away from colors. We've had 2 chances to do the color meditation. Now we're going to explore a guided meditation I do for the kinesthetic mode. It's a body meditation, and during that, I'll be asking you to become the observer. Okay, and I'll talk more about that. So let's do the guided meditation now. When we think of the word relaxation, it can mean different things to different people. So again, I went online and looked up a definition for relaxation. And what I found there was a fairly straightforward definition, being the act of relaxing or a state of being relaxed. The only problem here, that doesn't really tell us very much about what relaxation is. So we need something a little bit more specific. So I went to a medical definition of the relaxation response. And here I found something that was more detailed and gave a more specific answer. Under a more medical definition of the relaxation response, what we find is it is an integrated hypothalamic reaction in which the human being or animal experiences safety and a sense of nurturing, resulting in decreased sympathetic nervous system activity that physiologically and psychologically is almost a mirror image of the fight or flight response. It can be self-induced through the use of techniques associated with transcendental meditation, yoga, and biofeedback. Now, I'm going to look at 3 of the terms that were mentioned in this definition. One is the hypothalamic reaction, the sympathetic nervous system, and the fight or flight response. And these 3 terms were used to define the relaxation response. So let's just go at each of these one at a time. Now, if you look at this hypothalamic reaction, Question is, what is the hypothalamus and where is it? Well, here's a little graphic, and you can see the hypothalamus sits right under the midbrain, right above the brain stem, and attached to it is a really important gland, the pituitary gland. And as it turns out, the hypothalamus is one of the most active areas in the brain. It's the area of the brain that establishes balance and homeostasis. So the hypothalamus is a regulator. So that's the regulator of the body. It's the hypothalamus in conjunction with the brain stem that would kick off the fight or flight response. And here you see that when you're under, call this the stress response, when you're under stress, or if you're in the fight or flight response, some things start to happen. Your breathing becomes faster, your heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up. And these are all things that you need to do if you are fighting or running, but not good if you're in that elevated state of stress, prolonged times, if it becomes a chronic situation. And that's really what we're looking at, inappropriate states of fight or flight response. So what is the sympathetic system? Well, it resides under a more global system in the body, in the nervous system, called the autonomic nervous system, which handles all of the responses that the body does that you don't have control over directly. They're automatic in a sense. And the sympathetic nervous system regulates the heart. It regulates things like respiration, the breathing, and very important one, blood sugar levels. So it can elevate blood sugar to increase the amount of energy present in the body. And similarly, it can regulate and increase adrenaline. And that's where the term fight or flight resides. So it resides under the autonomic nervous system in a sub-area, and it's considered a separate system. It was in the mid-1800s that the stress response was identified. And you can see the professor there pointing to the hypothalamus and the adrenals. And it was identified that this was a great cause of stress and tension. So appropriately, all kinds of medications and approaches were adopted to do what? To tone down the stress response. It was considered the problem. So a whole slew of medications came out to do that. Now, this is good, but what if the problem isn't the sympathetic system? What if it's something else? What else could it be? Well, it wasn't until the mid-1970s that Dr. Benson discovered the relaxation response. So up until that point, the West was trying to control hypertension by controlling the stress response. But Dr. Benson said, wait a minute now, there's another response, and it's the relaxation response. And you can see his comment here that I think some of us could use. It says, don't worry if other thoughts come up while you're meditating. Just say, oh well, and continue on your day or meditate. That's sort of like the underturn of the mindfulness approach. And I did mention the other day that mindfulness came out of Harvard University, as well as the discovery of the relaxation response. So a lot of great things came out of the Harvard University. But it's very important that the work that Dr. Benson did, and he traveled to the East, and he had a lot of the advanced meditators in the lab, and they did all kinds of research on them, and that's how they identified that, hey, wait a minute, there's another whole response here. And it also resides under the autonomic nervous system, but it's a separate system. And this is the one that will take the heart into a slower state and lower blood pressure. So it kind of does, as it's suggested in the definition, it kind of does the mirror image, but it also does something very, very interesting as well. It's only when you are in the parasympathetic response or the relaxation response that you digest and also heal. So healing and digestion are all stimulated when you're in the relaxation response. Another important difference is the way the overall body works. So if we look at both systems together, I know this is a complicated picture, but there's a reason why I'm showing you this. If you look at both systems together, on the left-hand side you have the parasympathetic system, and on the right you have the sympathetic. Notice here that these two systems originate out of different areas in the spine. That the parasympathetic starts at the upper part of the spine and the lower part. And the sympathetic, the stress response, comes from the more central part of the spine. So completely different wiring, going to the same organs, but the source of these controls are coming from different approaches. And this is very important, that they are distinctly different, yet they're controlling the same organs. Okay? In terms of the sympathetic system, and if you look at the digestive system on the bottom there, it would cause it to stop and to favor the muscle. So the whole role of the sympathetic system is to switch the favoring of the blood supply and energy to your external muscles, your arms, legs, in preparation for fighting, in preparation for running. So, for instance, you might notice that when people are under the stress response, they can't think as well. Well, one of the big demands for blood supply, oxygen, and energy is the brain. Brain's one of the biggest users of energy. When you are under the stress response, blood leaves the internal organs, or not necessarily leaves, but is favored towards the arms and legs. And people who are, as I said, who are under the stress may not be able to think as well. Well, the reverse is true. People who are more relaxed, quite often you might, if you have to write an exam or do something that requires a lot of thinking, you will stop and just chill, relax, calm down, and you become a little bit more articulate in your thinking. So the relaxation response favors the internals and brain. The sympathetic favors the externals, right? Very important. It's really important because it has an impact in our healthcare system. So here's a graphic showing data from the Nova Scotia government, and they did a survey. And when they looked at visits to the emergency rooms in Nova Scotia, they saw an alarming number. If you look at this very, very carefully, you will see that it's 0.1% of all the visits to the Nova Scotia emergency rooms were life-threatening situations. And in total, it's about 90% of the visits were for less than urgent reasons. What could some of those reasons be? Well, it doesn't take a huge leap in conclusions here that these are people who are having a stressful situation, so stressed out that they have to go to emergency. And the doctors, as it says in that comment there, are spending their time dealing with many of the cases which are not life-threatening. People are in the stress. Now, when you're in the stress response, you will not feel well. You'll be ill. So it's a huge impact. We talked about workplace stress and its impact on the energy system and on the physical body. It takes a real toll. Now, I just want to clarify something here, that when someone's under stress, their physical symptoms are real. They will get physically ill. So I didn't mean to suggest that the problems that these people are bringing to emergencies are not real. It's just that they could be dealt with in clinics or at the doctor's office. They're not true emergencies, life or death emergencies. So how does the East approach this complicated system? Because as I pointed out earlier, it's two systems, both systems are interacting on the same organs. So in reality, what you could have, it's not just that one system needs to be blocked or that one system needs to be stimulated. Now what you see here, you see on the very top, the yin-yang balance. So if the yin, which is the relaxation energy, and the yang, which is the stimulant energy, if they are in balance, then the systems kind of work pretty good. But there are 4 ways that the body can get out of balance. If you look on the left bottom portion there, you'll see one of the systems can be in excess. So you could have excess yang, which would be you're too excited, you're too stressed, or you could have excess yin and too much relaxation. The body doesn't function because it's out of balance. An example would be there are conditions where people will be so tired all the time, like they're just basically in sleep mode all the time. They have no energy. So this is a chronic condition of chronic fatigue. So that's if one of the systems are in excess. Now you could have the reverse. You could have where one of the two systems, parasympathetic, sympathetic, are in deficiency. So if your yin, your parasympathetic energy, is deficient, it will look like an excess of yang. And this is where the problem occurs, that an excess of yang can look like a deficiency of yin, the symptoms. So treating, in the case of excess yang, treating the person and blocking their stress response will work if that is the situation. But what if it's the reverse? What if what they really need is to stimulate their parasympathetic nervous system, to stimulate the yin? And I had some doctors visiting from China as part of the St. Mary's Confucius Institute, and I was fortunate 2 years in a row to spend time with them. I was taken to some locations in Nova Scotia where they could make presentations, and they made a very distinct description of some diseases, some common diseases such as high blood pressure, diabetes, and so on. And what they said was that when they treat, say, diabetes, they have to first identify whether it is an excess of one of the systems or a deficiency of one of the systems, because it's 2 different approaches, 2 different ways of treating it. So one pill won't work. You might know of people who take a stimulant and they fall asleep. This could happen. If you're giving someone a stimulant and they are actually in excess yin, they may actually fall asleep. So this question here is, how do you identify whether it's a deficiency or excess? And that's what a traditional Chinese doctor would do. So they treat, in the East, they would treat the body with food. Food and herbs would treat the physical body. And you'll notice here that some foods are categorized as cooling or yin foods, and other foods are categorized as warming or yang foods. So if someone has a deficiency in yang, they give them more yang food. Pretty straightforward, eh? But the trick is recognizing what situation you're in. The other area where traditional Eastern approaches would be to treat the actual energy. And you've heard of acupressure. So there are points in your body that if you stimulate them, will stimulate the body's energy system. And here, this example for headache, And for generally overall stress, in this example, it says in 30 seconds you can neutralize a headache. Well, that's pretty impressive, right? And that point, I'll show everyone in the class how to find that point. That point is also good for calming the yang energy. It's a very, very good point to know. It's called Hergu point. But what you're manipulating is the body's energy system called the meridian system. The third way that we can use an Eastern approach is to balance these two systems, because the point I'm trying to make here, it's not about taming one over the other. It's about balancing the two, more holistic approach. The other way to do it is with a meditation. And in our detachment meditation today, I'm going to use what we learned in the first guided meditation. I'd like you to implement that in this, to just be the observer. So when you are doing your meditation, just observe your thoughts and don't get too wrapped up in them. Don't interact with the thoughts. Just observe them and politely disconnect from them. The other thing I want to point out here is the posture. And at one point, I don't know whether it was in the first session or the second, I mentioned that this graphic of the lady sitting about the chin and neck. So the alignment here is to prevent blocking of either of the nervous systems. So by sitting with your shoulders over your hips and your feet flat on the floor, the spine is completely free and balanced, right? Because you need to have that circulation going from the spine in order to balance the systems. The other key point is, remember that it was in that area, the hypothalamus, that all of this gets regulated. So the chin needs to be slightly down, the neck needs to be relaxed, the ears over the shoulders, and this takes pressure off of the upper spine and allows for proper circulation in that area. So this posture, so we're going to try today to make sure that everyone knows how to find this posture. We'll take a moment to go through it, and then we'll do our meditation. Okay, well that's it for today's session. I really hope you enjoyed it. The next session will be on February 2nd, 2017. And again, we'll be here in the Dalhousie University Room B400. And our topic will be brain balance, how to balance the brain. I'd like to thank you for participating and watching this video, and I'll see you in the next session.